Alrighty, so we should be recording now. Okay, so we're going to start just by talking about Hipaa and FERPA. One thing I'll say real quick is a lot of people on the internet who are armchair doctors or armchair lawyers think they know what Hipaa is and will spell it wrong when they're talking about it. So it is HIPAA, not like a hippo, HIPPA. So that's just something to know going forward. So it's the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. So that's where you get those two A's. And so it protects patient health information from being disclosed without the patient's consent or knowledge. So Hipaa only applies to people who could disclose that information. So that includes, doctors, nurses, anyone within a medical facility, essentially, who could have access to your records as a patient. So for those of you who will be interacting in this sort of setting where there might be some sort of medical record, whether those are mental health records, physical health records, what have you, you will have to abide by this policy. So let me scroll down a little so we can get all the HIPAA information on the screen. And so this is basically to protect your health information, but then also allows you to give permission for other people to access it as need be. So for example, let's say, I'll give you an example from my personal life. So when I was pregnant, I had gestational diabetes. So I worked with my primary care doctor and then also with a specialist. And the two of them were from different health systems. So I was able to sign a release and they were able to talk to each other and share information to best coordinate my care. And others of you have probably had similar experiences. This also is what allows us to have access to our own information. So it used to be prior to Hipaa and really prior to the infrastructure needed to build the my chart and online chart things that you might access yourselves, that if a patient wanted access to their own information, it was a little bit of a challenge. You would actually have to, pay a fee per page for them to photocopy it for you, for example. But now, so who does this apply to? Any healthcare provider who's going to electronically transmit health information. So most doctors' offices, hospitals, care centers, places along those lines. Health insurers are also covered by this, clearinghouses as well. And then people who act on behalf of them, so people who do their data analysis, billing, things along those lines, also have to follow Hipaa. So you don't have to be a doctor or a nurse to have to follow Hipaa. So what is the protected information here? It's the health information. And this is individually identifiable health info in any form. And again, it's these covered entities is the language you'll hear. So again, around the pandemic, a lot of people have been like, your employer can't ask for your vaccination status. That's a violation of Hipaa. No, it's actually not, because they're not a covered entity unless they're actually a hospital, right? So, and Simba's gonna give you guys a visit. I figured he would. You gotta actually sit up so we can see your face. There you go. Well, the back of your head at least. But so what would be a HIPAA violation is if your employer contacted your doctor's office without notifying you, and then your doctor's office provided information to your employer without your consent. So your doctor's office would be the one in the violation of HIPAA at that point. And then where is the responsibility? Who can we disclose to? Oh, bud. I know you like to hack, but not right now. Sorry if that was like seizure inducing. You just stepped on the keyboard. But so we want to look at the individual. Again, as I said, things like my chart, we can all access our information now. You know, things like disclosing to insurers so that they can you know, do what they need to do to process claims and get things paid, essentially. What I'm trying to actually do is zoom in a little bit. That's all right. And then we also will look at things like, oh, here it is, there we go. Just the captions were in front of it for a second. It also is things like disclosures that the individual agrees to, public interest. So, for example, people might use de-identified information to track COVID numbers. And in fact, they're doing that, right? And then, you know, trying to help people who are like victims of abuse or neglect. You might report things that they don't want to report, particularly if they are a vulnerable population, which includes things like kiddos, elders who are not able to care for themselves, and people with disabilities who are not able to care for themselves. And then you can also have data sets that, again, wouldn't have identifying information that you could use to analyze those. So that's HIPAA, and that's the one everyone sort of knows about. And so it basically says your healthcare provider and all these other covered entities have to protect your health information. They can't just go sort of like spreading it on the street. And also, one of the things that's not in this chart, because it's a little more complex, is not everyone is just allowed to access your record, right? They have to be someone who's treating you. So for example, when I was on my residency, I had a client who it was like her ex-sister-in-law worked at the hospital system and had like tried to access her information, which is a big HIPAA violation. No, like don't do that. Just access the people you're treating, right? All right, but FERPA is something that for sure, Ashanti, you're going to run into. This is also something that I run into, and actually, Ariana, when you're watching this video, this applies to you as well. So FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. And it's basically anyone who's a student from like preschool all the way up until college. And I think honestly, also through, you know, like postgrads. That probably applied to me when I was doing my PhD, for example. And so it gives parents or students who are eligible. So for example, when you're at the age of majority, typically 18, but can vary from state to state, more control of their records. So for example, you all might not even remember this, but when you first got to Wesleyan, you had to sign something that said whether or not your parents were allowed to access your records, and whether or not your professors are allowed to even talk to your parents. So like, let's say one of your parents calls me or emails me, I actually have to go into WebAdvisor, and there's a place where I can check it and see whether or not you have given permission for me to even talk to them. If you haven't, which totally respect. In fact, sometimes I think kind of like everyone should, although I understand emergency situations, but then I can't technically even confirm that you're a student in my class. Same thing actually for HIPAA. Like if you haven't granted a release, you can't technically even reveal that someone's a patient. So, you know, if someone calls and like, is so-and-so being seen here? Like, I can't tell you that. Particularly for mental health situations, you can imagine where it becomes important. So it also prohibits educational institution from disclosing personal identifiable information and education records without written consent. So same type of thing. They can't just go and like shout your educational information from the rafters. They need your permission to send anyone like your transcript. And this is something that, again, even though we're professors, we're smart people, my colleagues sometimes violate without realizing it. So for example, If anyone's ever gone, well, probably not, because we haven't really had one the past couple of years, but traditionally we have a very nice ceremony for Honors Day where each department gives their award to like a graduating senior and says a little thing about why the student is receiving the award. And in the past, members of other departments, not psych, have actually shared students' GPAs, which like they're always like celebrating, like, oh, they have a 3.9 whatever. Well, that's technically a FERPA violation. So we're not supposed to do that. And this is something that actually like in the past few years came up with like, don't do this. You know, it's a pretty innocuous one, but if someone got upset, they could technically sue us for that. So this is also why if you've ever requested like a letter of recommendation from a professor who's not your advisor, and when they go to write it, you'll get an email that says like, let's say you asked me and I'm not your advisor. It would say like, Dr. Taryn Myers has accessed your record and for this reason, it's like letter of recommendation. And that's just to let you know, like, hey, someone who wouldn't usually look at your record came. Now, if you're my advisee, no big deal. I just go to my list of advisees and I can look at your academic record there because that's part of FERPA, that I'm like within the FERPA circle, basically. So this applies to any public or private school or any state or local education agency who receives any kind of federal funding. So like if their students receive federal grants, for example, or loans, they have to comply. So this is really the vast majority, if not all, educational purposes, all institutions. So elementary, secondary, post-secondary. So I was wrong about the like pre-K. Unless it's part of a public school. So for example, one of Biden's initiatives he would like to get through is free preschool, right? If that happened, they would probably be added to FERPA because then they would be receiving federal funding. So again, this is why the registrar's office has to be carefully locked. Their records have to be carefully guarded to make sure nothing is released that's not supposed to be. Very similar to a doctor's office. For example, while I was in grad school, we realized our clinic was like kind of HIPAA compliant and kind of not. So they actually like built an extra wall with a lock to even like get back to, like there was a door that could be closed and locked where our records were, but like a lot of times it was open because we were going in and out of there, and typically there was someone in there, but they put another door between that and the lobby, so you know it just eliminated the possibility of someone wandering in and finding those records, basically. So you know, things that you have to do in order to check those things. The protected information here is the student education records. Grades, but also at some institutions, let's say you see a school counselor, your mental health notes might be in there, right? Or you see the school nurse, right? So they are maintained by that school or some other educational agency or institution that again receives federal funding. So who can you disclose to? School officials will always have access to this, you know, the head of school, usually the like administrators, things like that. Obviously, teachers will have access to information pertinent to their classes. For example, I can see your grades in my classes, but let's say you're taking an English class. I can't see your grades in that during the semester. I can only see your grades in that if you're my advisee after they're officially posted. So like if you're my advisee, I can see your grades when you could see them. And that's for advising purposes. But typically, if you're just a student who takes my class, I can only see the info for my class. Okay, so it's what you need for that. And then let's say, you know, specified officials for audit or evaluation purposes, people who are reviewing overall things might have access to it. Or let's say a school psychologist is going to do a evaluation of a student, then they would have access to the records to sort of look at the history as part of their assessment. And then, again, same thing here, financial aid stuff. If there are people doing research, again, typically these would be de-identified. Our accrediting bodies can access some of this. Health and safety emergencies, heaven forbid, one of you has to be hospitalized and you have records in the student health center, right? The student health center now is probably always both Hipaa and FERPA, but now that it's Centera, it's even more Hipaa than FERPA, I think. And then, if something happened to, especially like a kid under 18, with the law, whether that's their parents are in trouble, the kid's in trouble, you want to be able to access it for that. And then it can be subpoenaed. And that's something that's not listed here for Hipaa, but like documents can be subpoenaed for cases as well. So let's say you sue somebody and you want to say this caused this medical problem or this caused this emotional distress. The other side can subpoena your health records to show that you've actually had those problems. All right, any questions about Hipaa or FERPA or how they apply? Yeah, we're going to do some videos that'll kind of help illustrate some of this, but this chart is like the most helpful resource I've ever seen on these, honestly. A lot of documents on these are really lengthy and just not helpful. Alrighty, so we're going to start with this video. And this, a lot of the videos we'll watch for this class are created by people who are genuinely interested in talking about ethics and legal violations. And so like this first video we'll watch features nurses. And so they are not actors, right? And one of the other ones, actually several of the other ones we'll watch will feature graduate students. Again, not actors, but people who care enough about these issues to make educational materials. So go ahead and get this one going.
Oh my God, Bobby gave me this patient at 378. She's got C. diff, and I can tell she's just gonna run me all day long. And she's gonna be a bad one, I can tell.
Oh no, did you bring your nose plug?
I probably should.
I'm like 380 a place now you down the hall.
Oh, I'm sure you will. I'm sure. This is taking forever. Do you want to take the stairs?
Yeah, let's just go take the stairs.
Okay.
Oh my God. What are their names now? I'm calling the hospital administrator. I can't believe they're talking about my mom in front of me. What was her name?
Tess.
Did you get the other one? I can't believe they were talking about that in the hallway. And they said they're...
Alrighty, so what was the issue here? Again, anybody can unmute and chime in, or if you need to type in the chat, I'll open that too.
Shanti, did you want to go?
No, you can go. You're fine.
Okay. So the person, the nurse were like talking about confidential like stuff that's going on with like a patient in the public area, and maybe that other nurse didn't even have like that patient or was affiliated with that patient at all, so there was no need for them to even talk about that patient.
Yeah, and this one I think is a really good example because they didn't use her name, right? They never used the patient's name. So how did they figure out that they were talking about her mom?
Because she said her number, like, and I'm pretty sure like she would know either by like a room number or like looking at the charts, or they telling her like what she is, so you don't know. Even saying that as much, like even if another person was walking past, I work in a hospital, they could have like figured out, oh, I know that patient, or I know who she's talking about. That patient is in like room such and such. So even then, it's like just saying it out loud, you could put like context clues together.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that this is a really nice example because some people might watch that and say like, oh, well, they didn't ever really violate HIPAA, right? Because I never said the patient's name, but it's any identifying information, like Ashanti just pointed out, right? So, yeah, what could the nurses have done if they wanted to talk about this scenario? Maybe where would be a more appropriate location to do so?
Pretty much anywhere that's not public.
Right.
The hallway wasn't not the best choice.
Yeah, yeah. So oftentimes there's a break room, right? Things along those lines. I mean, nurses' stations are often out in the open, so those will also be problematic. So yeah, finding a private place and, again, fully recognizing as someone who's worked in healthcare settings that there are times you need to like have this, we often call it like gallows humor, right? Where you're talking about things like this, or you're just having a rough day and you need to vent. Yeah, do it behind closed doors, right? So like when I was working on the spinal cord injury unit, when I was on my residency, we had a weekly meeting to check in about all the patients. And sometimes people would be sort of like joking, particularly if the patients themselves had good senses of humor about things the patients said, right? But like we would do it in a conference room that had closed doors that only medical professionals could access. And, wasn't like one of those ones where like the doors are paper thin, like it actually had sound blocking. So yeah, exactly. Y'all are spot on. All right, let's look at scenario number 2 here.
My patient in 370 is having some complaints about her care from the nurse aide. So I thought, since you're the nurse manager, that I bring it to your attention.
Okay, I'll go talk to her.
Okay.
Hi, Miss Davidson. How are you doing today?
I'm good.
I'm the nurse manager, and I just wanted to come talk to you about your care you're receiving. I heard that you're having some complaints about the nurse aide.
Oh, yes, I just have some problems getting to the bathroom on time. They just don't seem to want to answer my call lights fast enough.
Okay.
If we could fix that, I'd be very happy.
Okay, well, I will talk to them about that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Oh my gosh, Brandon, can you believe it? Miss Davidson's in the hospital and she has colon cancer. I know. I didn't even know that. But yeah, apparently she got it last week. They found out, and I don't know. I'll let you know when I find out more. They're gonna do some more tests and see how she's doing. But okay, I'll let you go. Love you. Bye.
Alrighty. So what's the issue here?
She immediately got on the phone and talked to like, I don't know if it's like whoever, like a husband or brother, whoever it was. And especially because she's like in a public area. And that's the problem too. And another thing is like, instead of like hurrying up and resolving the problem, like, to help the lady out, she immediately just went to a phone call to like tell what's going on. And then another thing is you don't know who that person is going to tell, because that like, once you tell somebody, oh, such and such is sick, they'll be like, oh my God, I didn't know that. Then tell the next person. And maybe that lady didn't want anybody to know. Maybe her family member doesn't even know that she's in a hospital. So it's like that information is like going against her, because maybe she didn't want nobody to know she was sick or something was going on. So she just violated that, saying like immediately just doing that instead of fixing, like, getting her to the bathroom quicker.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's such a good point. And I really like that you brought up the like, she's going on a call when she should be helping her. I think I've been using this video since I started this class in 2011, I think. And no one's ever said that one. And so I really extra appreciate that. Yeah, she's like doing this instead of doing her job, right? But yeah, exactly what Ashanti is saying, that like this woman might not want other people to know the patient, or she might not have had the chance to tell her family members yet. Right. So this is why, like, when there are like military members killed on the news, they won't say their names right away, right? Because they want to make sure the families are told first, because how awful would it be to this is how you found out your loved one died in combat, right? It's like just on the news. And it's certainly stuff like that can happen, and we don't want it to be that. So yeah, just being going and spreading these things, even if you know the person, right? Letting it be their decision. Yeah. Any other thoughts about this one? Alrighty, awesome. Well, I'm going to play violation number 3.
This is Mrs. Garrison. She only has about 6 weeks to live. Oh, wait.
Oh, she's okay. She's sleeping.
Okay. Yeah, she only has 6 weeks left to live, so we're just, she's in palliative care, so we're just kind of trying to make her as comfortable as possible. I gave her a dose, her last dose of morphine at 0600.
Okay.
And so, but main thing, just keep her clean after she has a bowel movement and everything. She's good.
Okay.
Miss Garrison, I heard you got 6 weeks to live. What happened to you? Well, good luck.
Alrighty. So reactions, what's going on here?
She's just like saying that sensitive information out loud. That's messed up.
Yeah, with the other patient in the room, right? And this, to be perfectly honest, can be tough, right? Certainly they could have debriefed, like we talked about before, somewhere not there, right? In a break room, in a secluded area, even in the hallway can be better, right? Particularly if patient room doors are closed. But yeah, I mean, I can share when I did consults in the hospital, where we would go and visit patients' bedside. Vast majority of the time, they could not leave, right? So for example, I'm seeing someone who just had a heart attack or a spinal cord injury, so I can't like take them somewhere else to talk to them. So if they're in a shared room, this happens, right? But typically you clear it with the person, you make it clear to them like, hey, I would love to talk to you about this. Do you feel comfortable talking in this scenario? The other thing you can do, which is like, it sounds weird, but humans kind of work like this, is just closing that curtain between the two beds. Obviously not a soundproof barrier, but it's like people will sort of tune out and like recognize that you want privacy when you do that. So something as simple as that can make a difference. But yeah, I typically tell the story here of one of the hardest consultations I ever did. So the first hospital I worked in consultation at, we would be asked to go see anyone who self-reported mental health issues, but also anyone who came in with drugs or alcohol in their system, just to screen for potential abuse of alcohol or drugs. And this woman had come in with both in her system, and she was very comfortable to talk to me and explained a lot about her life. She was, you know, an exotic dancer, stripper. And she said, yeah, I have to take the drugs and alcohol to like make myself go on stage because I feel like a piece of meat. And it was just so sad and so disheartening. And this like middle-aged lady is just in the bed next to her, right? But you know, that was the client's choice that she felt comfortable self-disclosing. But yeah, this can be really tricky in hospital situations. So you want to try to do as much as you can. And again, only disclose information if you know someone else is in the room to the patient, if the patient says it's okay. And I would say not everybody's great about running through this. So this is a good scenario to consider. So for example, I know like Kaylee Sue, you know, sometimes there are shared rooms or open doors at Our Lady. And I know people have like taken their folks to like one of their atriums before to talk, you know, someplace that's like a little more secluded. Alrighty, gonna go ahead and play violation 4.
Oh, that's 370's call light.
Ew, discharge? Ugh.
And that's the end of that one. Well, go ahead. And I've watched that so many times, and I don't know if they're talking about the person actually having discharge from somewhere or just having to fill out discharge paperwork, which can also be onerous. Maybe it's both, who knows? But reactions, what's going on here? What could they have done differently?
They probably should have closed the personal files before leaving it unattended.
Yeah, definitely. So electronics are another way that, this can be violated. So yeah, typically you're supposed to log out of the computer if you leave. A lot of places now will just have, or like you plug your ID in to the computer, and then you need that wherever you go. So that you have to unplug it in order to go elsewhere, and then that logs you out of the computer, for example. And that's not just healthcare settings. Like my husband works at the naval shipyard, and he has that set up for his computer. He actually had to get one of those for home during the early stages of the pandemic. So that was interesting. But yeah, so she could have logged out, right? And obviously, especially for nursing staff, it's pretty typical to have communal computers. But if you can do something like that behind the desk, right, at least, rather than at one of the units in the hallway, it's probably better. There's some privacy possibilities there. Yeah, the other thing people will do, and I know they do this on the computers in the business office on campus, and then we also had them when I worked at the VA, is there are screen protectors you can put on that essentially you can only read what's on the screen if you're directly in front of it. So someone who's walking up before you get a chance to log out can't see what you're working on. So that's another way that you can kind of keep things private as well. Yeah. So thoughts, questions about these sort of HIPAA related situations that could come up, and ways to alleviate them. They're pretty simple. Oh, go ahead, Sasha.
Yeah. I was just gonna say that, yeah, it's very important stuff to learn about because with my internship, we went over a hefty manual and lots of confidentiality rules. And she was just going over how if you ever are writing papers for class and stuff, there may be some people's stories you want to tell, or you want to talk about, and that's fine, but you have to change identifying information, unless they give you permission. And there's these extra documents I would have to fill out if I wanted to use the client's actual real names and stuff. And so I didn't even think about the paper stuff. I was oh yeah, I know not to talk about things like that. But even in school, our internships, there's probably some people that just don't want that information out about their situation, and we have to take that account into our classroom as well. So it was a really eye-opening, oh yeah, got to make sure to change the name or change things, so that way anybody, it could end up on the internet and anybody wouldn't know who that person is being identified. And as well as the talking about different people within an office, we all work together. We all have some sort of integrating in some other areas of the building. So we definitely have to be careful when we're talking about certain people and what they're going through. And just those people that are accountable for those clients need to know, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah, we tend to consider this class sort of umbrella of confidentiality, but if we're on campus, in theory, someone could walk by the room and hear things. So yeah, we typically don't use client names, and we talk sort of vaguely about situations that are difficult. Yeah, and I do that when I teach too, right? If I'm using client examples, I never use names, right? I might say that they were a woman, right? But beyond that, I don't tend to use, they were from this town, or something, blah, blah, right? So yeah, that's really important. And yeah, that, web of confidentiality, you got to be careful who you're sharing it with and who, because you never know who knows somebody. And that can be a challenge as well. I'm currently in training to volunteer with a national organization, and part of the training I did this morning before class actually was talking about how, you can say you're a volunteer with the organization, but not to say your specific role, just in case, you don't know, and someone could end up needing to contact you, right? And you don't want them to hesitate because they know that you're a volunteer type of thing. So, oh, are you back? Okay, did we bore you, but now we're interesting again? You didn't like the videos? Okay. Yeah, other thoughts, any other thoughts, questions about this?
I was thinking like even like photography, I know is like a big thing too. Cause even like working at St. Mary's before, I know like not taking pictures of the children was like a main thing, like forced when they were like, yeah, just don't, like, even if you like dress them up in like the cutest outfit and you just don't take a picture, because it's like that's not your child. And it's like in that professional field, you don't want to like violate anybody or post it on social media or something like that. And somebody's like, oh my God, I know that person's kid, and this and this and that. And even with working at Chesapeake, I know they said the same thing, like no photography and nothing unless they're doing it themselves, for maybe like a yearbook or if they have events going on. But I know with your personal phone, that's like a big thing too, not to violate. And
Yeah,
even just about school too, like you have to sign a paper like for consent, because I remember like I think in high school, if you wanted to have pictures taken of you, you would have to like sign a paper, because if they would check your records and if your name is not on there to be like, oh yeah, I could get a picture, even if you wanted one so badly, they'll be like, no, I'm not doing it because you like I can't.
yeah, exactly. A lot of thoughts came into my head during that. You had a lot of really good points. Yeah, one is that this applies to like research in these settings too. So for example, I've done research studies, hello Sabeth, where we take pictures of people, and I mean sometimes we're even having them posted on their own social media, but that has to be like a separate consent line to get the picture taken. In addition to like the normal consent to participate in the study. Yeah. And then, for example, we don't want pictures of our daughter posted on social media until it's her decision, which, probably won't be for a while. She's only 3.5. She doesn't really understand yet. And so like, we actually have paperwork we fill out for her school saying, like, please don't post pictures, exactly like you were saying. Yeah. And then the other thing I was remembering is, it was when I was on my residency, there was a little bit of a kerfuffle because like someone in surgery had like taken either picture or video, and I don't even think you could see the client's face, the patient's face, but you still can't do that, right? Unless they've, like for the VA, we had an extra paper they had to sign, like if we were going to film them for our training purposes. So yeah, you want to be extra careful about that stuff as well. Recording, things along those lines. I'll give you another example, actually. So Ashanti's mentioned that I know Dr. Jankowski, who's the head of school over there, because I'm working on some research projects with them. And because we want to maintain confidentiality, we actually, like, if we want to get information out of the files, even if we have parental consent, right? We're not going to do it without parental consent, right? And child assent. We are having someone else who's not on the research team who already has access to that information through FERPA and whatnot, do the documentation of that information. So again, just to maintain that extra level of confidentiality. And I did some of that in grad school as well. Like I did some record reviews of patient records. And a lot of times, sometimes there will be like an extra thing you sign for that, or sometimes it's just included in like the overall hospital or clinic thing that like your records might be used in a de-identified way for research. But it's actually kind of a fun process to do when you do record reviews. I just sort of get to know about people you've never seen. So yeah, it's kind of a bummer EVMS didn't have anybody, didn't need anybody this year, because typically they have people who do record reviews and go through really cool records from like 30 years ago. And you can see how they did things very differently then, for example, than they do now. Any other questions, comments, things along those lines? Well, another thing that came up that made me think, Sasha, when you were making your point is the fact that this is one of the reasons why I have you turn in your reflections via Blackboard, is that, you know, again, Blackboard's not perfect in terms of confidentiality, but at least gives us another layer. So I just went and double checked, and I took off all the, like, I used to have they disappeared after the deadline and yada, yada, yada. No, they're just there. So you can turn in all your reaction papers there throughout the semester. And again, it's just like one more layer of protection, even if they are de-identified. And the reason we tend to really like using Blackboard as well is because, again, it just provides that level for us as your professors to protect you for purpose reasons, right? So like, only you and your professor can see your grades. And this is why I'm super careful too when I'm like showing something on Blackboard in class. I'm always like, let me make sure I'm not on the grade book, because if I were to even accidentally have the grade book open and you saw everyone's grade in the class, right, that's a huge FERPA violation. So that's part of being someone who has access to this type of information, is you need to be responsible. So. Alrighty, so like I said, typically we will not take the full class time. So today we'll probably end there. Well, we will end there. Let me go ahead and